Good morning, fellas. This is Alex Arcuglia. Bling! And this is the Morning Rant, the show in which I talk about my life as a TV commercial producer and software developer while I telecommute from my home to the office. And this is the light of the late winter here in the suburb of Milan. Yeah, fuck yeah. After the last episode, a couple people asked me to do some follow-up about my workflow while producing this animated short, the Lost Ruby. And so here it is, something that is a quite a light version of what I learned in these last 6 months. First, AI-generated video is changing every day. Every couple weeks, everything has to be reorganized because there's a lot of stuff going on, new models and new way of interacting with these models. I started this adventure in November, and at the time, the only way to produce images that I had was Nano Banana. But it was interesting because Nano Banana can create continuity with characters, style, and shape because you can feed it with a reference image. But today things have changed a little, and so I use Nano Banana Pro. Things are more complicated, but more the results are more accurate. The first thing I do when I try to create something new is to create a character sheet. So I feed the Nano Banana with a single picture, and I say, create the character sheet for this character. Show me 2 or 3 views, one standing, one walking, and several facial expressions. Given the fact that I was producing a short animated movie, I didn't have to create different outfits. But it's something that you have to keep in mind if you have to do something that spans in a longer period of time. The 2 main characters are a cat and a dog, and so they do not dress. And the same for the villain, the snake. In the original story, there were other 2 characters, a rabbit and a butterfly, but I have to strip them off because the short is not so short, and I couldn't have more minutes of footage to use. And in the end, these 2 characters were not so relevant, so I simply cut them off before starting writing the script. After characters, you have to focus on environments. Environments in this short are quite interesting because we have a lot of environments, but the main focus of the story takes place in this enchanted forest. But when they enter the forest is glowing and charming and sunny. When they go further and further to the center of the forest, there's evening and then there's night, and so everything is going darker for the atmosphere, and darker because they start to face their enemy and the villain. The atmosphere is much more moody. And so I have to create some references for the forest, for the environment. To create the storyboard shots, the first image of the video that I used as a reference to create the animation, I still use a Nano Banana then and Nano Banana Pro now. I try to guide the creation of this storyboard shot using a lot of text and a lot of description, but sometimes the composition is not the one that I need, and so I used another trick. First, I created a version of the character the way I needed it. So if I would need the cat running and scared, so I say, create the 8 views for the cat running with the fear, and show me all the views in a single image. This is the kind of prompt that I use in Nano Banana Pro. The views are the front view, left front, left, rear left, rear right, right, and front right. And it works once in 5 times. So you have to repeat this prompt many times before achieving the correct result, or you have to mix more images. Then I used a new feature of Altimedia Converter, the app that I wrote, to do a lot of stuff with the media. And this new feature split the images after the extraction of the feature. So the images take the reference, the style sheet, and then separate the items from the background using artificial intelligence, and then split the images in the single component with an algorithm very, very interesting, and keeping the alpha channel. So with a single image, I can have 8 already pre-keyed images. And then I use Keynote to compose it, the background and the foreground in a quite interesting way, in some way that I can use as a starting point. Sometimes I use a real background, sometimes I draw some lines, and then I say to Nano Banana, the blue area is the river, the green area is the forest, fill in the blanks. And then I say that sometimes for one video I have to create something like 5 to 15 tests until I find the perfect angle or something like a perfect angle. I love the Nano Banana Pro because when I first tried it, I used it to change this shot. I said, show me the same scene, but 3/4 from the top and 3/4 from the right. And it creates this other shot that I use in the movie. I love this feature, but it works once in in a while. Sometimes you can say, okay, rotate me this scene 10 degrees to the right, and it doesn't work. It works well with much higher angles, something like 45 or 90 degrees. And a lot of times doesn't work at all. And so you have to use Photoshop to eliminate the background and to create something new. Sometimes I use the word green screen, put me this character on a green screen so I can use After Effects to do more pristine work. After that, I created the first frame of this of the video I want to create. I usually tend not to use a last frame because tends to create something like a smooth transition between A and B, the first and the last frame. This means that if the video is 5 seconds long and you want to cut on the action, something that I do a lot because my editing style is always cut on the action, always cut on the movement, then you have something like a 3 seconds long shot instead of 4, because the first second is always very, very, very slow and it tends to have a lot of inertia. I used different models to do the stuff. My company has a subscription to Freepik, and so I have a lot of free credits for Halo, Minimax Free Fast, and Kling 2.5 up to 720p, one model, and 768p. Then I have a personal account on Google AI Pro, so I can use a lot of Google Veo 3.1, but I tend to use the fast version. Veo is quite good for a lot of things, but for movement, for action, I do prefer Minimax and Kling. Then I create a lot of videos. Sometimes I try to be under 10 videos, but a couple scenes make me create something like 30, 40 videos, 40 generations. And so please, environment, forgive me. I know that. In the end, I think I created something like 2,000 videos, 2,000 generations for this movie. That is something like 175 shots in the final count. The shot count is quite higher because I tend to have a very, very intense pace in cutting. I am a bastard son of Michael Bay. Sometimes if something doesn't work, I flip the image or I do pan, zoom, all the tricks that I can use to make things work. And I use a lot of time warping to accelerate a little or make a lot of slower things in a very fluid way. I call this liquid video because I want to keep the pace of the editing, given the fact that this is an animated movie and so everything is not so real. I can increase the inertia or increase the agility of the characters simply by changing the timing. All the videos are rendered at 24p, and the final movie is 24p, but using artificial intelligence model in Final Cut Pro, the time changing is very, very, very smooth, and I love the way it does it. I repeat, I do a lot of editing stuff. For the free action sequences that were the most difficult ones to recreate, I started with the first one. The characters use a floating log to go to the other side of the river. In the novel that I told to my son, things happen this way. they see a log floating on the river and they use it to go to the other side. And that was the initial idea for this short too. But when I put them on the log, and then I tried to animate it the first time, I had this animation, and it blew my mind because, oh my freaking God, this is amazing. I never thought about an adventure inside an adventure and so an action scene. And then I decided, okay, let's explore this using a wild river and a lot of combination of all the models. I spent 1 month and a half working on this, on the sequence, because I always wanted to add more clarity in the visual description of what's happening, and I wanted to do something that was quite interesting and quite engaging for the final audience. So this sequence went into 5 steps of refinement. The first version was okay, not so okay, and then the final version is quite cool and usable, and everything is working. And the same for the tornado sequence. And then river and tornado were in the original novel, but the tornado is much more scary because it's much powerful. In the novel, the wind is slowly increasing, while here the wind is super powerful and blow them away and make them fly. And in the novel, they get the ruby and then return to home. They have to hurry because the gate of the castle will close at midnight. But this is the only reason they have to run. But I say to myself, okay, they faced the water, they faced the air, and then they have to face something even scary for the final scene of the short. And so I said, fire. And for no particular reason, the forest starts burning. They have to run and escape very fast, because everything that stays in the forest will die with the forest itself. And so I created this 3-minute sequence with a lot of energy, and I spent all the Christmas break to do this thing, and I enjoyed it a lot, because I think maybe the most powerful scene I ever created in fiction, because it's quite difficult to do fiction without visual effects, and it's quite difficult to do visual effects without being cheap. Animation makes me free to experiment and to play like toys. It was very interesting, and the fire sequence was super cool. I think that the short is finished right now, but I want to test Seedance 2 when it will be available. And I want to use a friend of mine, she's a dancer and a performer, and want to capture her trying to escape a fictional danger, shooting with my iPhone and with a stabilizer, and trying to recreate this with the animation. It will be a test, but if it goes okay, then the shot will be a little longer, but a little more strong and powerful and engaging. And more up to date, because I started this thing in November, and now it's mid-February, and the world of generative AI video has changed a lot, and it's totally another thing. What else? I think that for this a little in-depth, I said everything. So thanks for watching me. Please comment down below if you want to know more about this process. As this hands and the icon says, subscribe to this channel and click on the bell to be notified when a new video will be released. And as always, thanks for watching me. Ciao! They see a floating log on the river. They see a floating log on the river and they use it. Arriverai alle 9:10. Oh, zitto. They see a floating log on the river. Oh, stai zitto, porco due! Ma che cazzo vuoi dalla mia vita? Devi stare zitto!